The awakening of the forgotten. High Sovereign Zixteri of the Viridian Collective stood silently on the observation deck of the Eternal Dominance, watching the endless starscape with 6 crystalline eyes. 15,000 years of uncontested rule had made the Viridians complacent. Their biomechanical bodies, a perfect fusion of evolved biology and integrated quantum technology, had given them dominion over 80% of the Milky Way. The remaining sectors were controlled by lesser species who paid tribute or provided resources. High Sovereign, a voice interrupted his contemplation. We've detected an anomaly. Commander Kelvosh approached, his translucent exoskeleton pulsing with data streams. The commander's nervous system was visibly processing information at rates that would have seemed impossible to previous galactic civilizations. Speak, Zixteri commanded, not bothering to turn. Our long-range sensors have detected a signal from the Forbidden Sector, specifically from Earth that was. The High Sovereign's body stiffened, bioluminescent patterns flickering across his skin in what lesser species recognized as alarm. Impossible. Earth was rendered uninhabitable during the Great Cleansing. Nothing could survive there. The signal matches no known technology in our archives, Kelvosh continued. It appears to be folding space somehow. Our sensors can barely interpret the readings. The Forbidden Sector had been quarantined since before Zixteri's ascension. All records indicated it contained only the radioactive remains of a once troublesome species called humans. Primitive bipeds who had briefly expanded beyond their home system before the Viridian ancestors had deemed them too unpredictable and eliminated them. Dispatch a reconnaissance fleet, Zixteri ordered. Minimal contact protocols. Observe only. What the High Sovereign didn't reveal was his disquiet. The ancient archives, accessible only to those of his rank, contained warnings about humanity that seemed almost superstitious. Warnings that, should they ever return, the very fabric of reality might not withstand their ambition. Admiral Seren Vega stepped onto the bridge of the Transcendence, humanity's flagship, and the culmination of 15 millennia of scientific advancement. Her neural implants connected her instantly to the ship's consciousness, and through it, to the 5,000 other vessels that comprised the return fleet. Status report. She spoke aloud, though it was unnecessary. The information was already flowing through her enhanced mind. The quantum beacon has been active for 72 hours. Her second-in-command, Commander Marcus Chen, responded. We've detected a response. A fleet of approximately 30 vessels has entered the outer Sol system. Seren nodded. Exactly as predicted by the Gestalt intelligence that had guided humanity's evolution during their self-imposed exile. 15,000 years ago, facing extinction from the technologically superior Viridians, humanity had made a desperate gamble. Rather than fight a losing war, they had activated experimental dimensional shift technology, moving their entire civilization slightly out of phase with normal spacetime. Not quite in this universe, not fully in another. In that strange pocket dimension, time flowed differently. What had been 15,000 years for the galaxy had been nearly 40,000 for humanity. 40 millennia of uninterrupted development, free from external threats, guided by artificial superintelligence and their own boundless creativity. Open communications, Seren ordered. Let's introduce ourselves to our old neighbors. The holographic display shimmered, eventually resolving into the image of what appeared to be an evolved insectoid being with multiple eyes and a bioluminescent exoskeleton. This is Commander Kelvosh of the Viridian Collective. Identify yourselves and state your purpose in this restricted zone. Seren stepped forward, her augmented body appearing deceptively human, despite the modifications that made her as much a technological marvel as a biological entity. This is Admiral Seren Vega of the United Earth Federation. We are returning to our homeworld after a long absence. The Viridian commander's posture shifted, light patterns flashing across its body in what Seren's neural interface translated as shock and disbelief. Impossible. The human species was eradicated 15,000 years ago. Seren smiled. a gesture that hadn't lost its impact even after all this time. Reports of our extinction were premature. We simply relocated while we prepared for our return. This sector is under Viridian control by right of conquest. Your presence here violates galactic law. Interesting perspective, Saren replied calmly. However, we have a different interpretation. This is our ancestral home, and we've come to reclaim it. The communication ended abruptly as the Viridian fleet began to assume an attack formation. Predictable, according to the Gestalt Intelligence's models of their behavior. They're charging weapons, Commander Chen reported unnecessarily, as Saren could feel the energy buildups through her connection to the ship's sensors. No aggressive action, she ordered. Deploy phase shields only. When the Viridian energy weapons fired, the beams simply passed through the human vessels as if they weren't there. The return fleet existed in a quantum superposition, partially phased out of conventional reality, a fundamental advancement that had been the first step in humanity's dimensional evolution. Record their reaction, Saren instructed, and prepare for Phase 2. It's time to show them what humanity has become. In the Viridian capital world of Zix Terra Prime, an emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called. Representatives from the 12 major species of the collective gathered in the crystalline spire, their varied physiologies accommodated by specialized environmental fields. High Sovereign Sixteri addressed the assembly, his voice resonating through both audible frequencies and direct neural transmissions. The reports are confirmed. Humans have returned, and their technology appears to have advanced significantly during their absence. Morden, the representative of the silicon-based Calderans, raised a crystalline appendage. How significant? Are they a genuine threat to collective dominance? The High Sovereign's bioluminescence darkened. Their vessels are immune to our weapons. They exist in some form of phase-shifted state that our technology cannot interact with. And their numbers. Initial scans indicate a fleet of over 5,000 capital ships. A murmur passed through the council chamber. What do they want? Asked the gaseous entity representing the Vordularian clouds. They claim to want only their ancestral territories, the Sol system, and the 17 colony worlds they inhabited before the Great Cleansing. That is unacceptable, Morden stated flatly. Those worlds have been terraformed and populated by collective species for millennia. I agree, the High Sovereign responded. However, our military options appear limited given their technological advantage. An aide approached hurriedly, interrupting the proceedings, a breach of protocol that indicated dire news. High Sovereign, we've received a transmission. The humans request an audience with the full council. They've somehow bypassed our security and are waiting in the antechamber. Stunned silence fell over the assembly. The antechamber was directly adjacent to the council room, on a planet 20,000 light-years from Earth. How did they arrive here? Zixteri demanded. Unknown, High Sovereign. They simply appeared. The massive doors to the council chamber opened, and a single human female entered. Admiral Saren Vega walked confidently to the center of the room, seeming completely at ease despite being surrounded by the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Greetings, representatives of the Viridian Collective, she said, her voice somehow perfectly audible to all species present, regardless of their auditory capabilities. I come with a proposal. You have no authority here, the High Sovereign stated, though with less conviction than he intended. Perhaps not under your laws, Saren acknowledged, but the laws of physics, those we've learned to negotiate with more successfully. She raised her hand, and the center of the chamber transformed into a three-dimensional star map of the galaxy, highlighting the former human territories. We request the peaceful return of these worlds to human governance. In exchange, we offer technological exchange in non-military applications, medical advancements, energy production, computational systems, benefits for all species of the collective. The High Sovereign's ancestral memories stirred with ancient warnings about human duplicity. And if we refuse, Saren's expression remained neutral. Then we will reclaim them regardless. We prefer cooperation, but we are prepared for resistance. You threaten the collective. Morden challenged. Not a threat. A statement of capability. Saren responded. Your ancestors believed they destroyed humanity. They were incorrect. We have evolved beyond what they could have imagined. She gestured, and the holographic display changed, showing the human vessel seemingly folding space around itself. This is mere dimensional manipulation, she explained. The simplest of our technologies now. We have spent 40,000 subjective years advancing our understanding of reality itself. The council chamber fell silent as the implications settled over them. The humans hadn't just survived. They had transcended. We will consider your proposal, the High Sovereign finally said. Return in 3 cycles for our answer. Admiral Vega nodded. We appreciate your consideration. For now, our fleet will remain in the Sol system, re-establishing our presence on Earth. Without walking toward an exit, she simply faded from view, leaving the stunned council to contemplate a new galactic reality, one where humanity had returned, and the balance of power had irrevocably shifted. Beyond the limits of reality. The 3 cycles passed in tense anticipation. Throughout Viridian space, military vessels were mobilized despite the apparent futility of conventional weapons against the human fleet. On 17 contested worlds, colonists prepared for evacuation, while others vowed to resist any human incursion. On Earth, a transformation was already underway. The barren, radiation-scarred planet that had been uninhabitable for 15 millennia was changing before the astonished eyes of Viridian observation drones. Vast atmospheric processors had been deployed in orbit, while on the surface, glittering structures grew organically from the poisoned soil, spreading like crystalline forests. In the depths of the eternal dominance, High Sovereign Sixturi reviewed the final intelligence reports with growing dread. Their most advanced probes, sent to analyze human technology, had returned with data that their scientists could barely comprehend. It appears, Chief Scientist Velmorax explained, her exoskeleton pulsing with troubled light patterns, that humans have developed technology that directly manipulates the fundamental laws of physics. They don't simply use the rules of reality. They rewrite them locally. Explain in terms I can use strategically, the High Sovereign demanded. They exist partially outside our universe's causal framework. Their ships don't move through space. They reconfigure space around themselves. Their weapons, if what we observed were weapons, don't destroy matter so much as redefine its properties. Commander Kelvosh, who had been silently absorbing the information, finally spoke. Can we replicate any of this technology? The scientist's bioluminescence dimmed. Not with our current understanding of physics. It would be like primitive organisms trying to comprehend quantum mechanics. The conceptual framework simply isn't there. The High Sovereign integrated this information with the historical archives he had been studying, particularly the oldest records that predated the Viridian ascendancy. There are ancient warnings, he said slowly, from the first civilization. Fragments that survived the collapse. They spoke of beings who would bend reality to will and step between the moments of time. I had always assumed these were metaphorical or religious texts. The humans must be contained, Commander Kelvosh insisted, regardless of their technological advantage. The collective has survived for 20,000 years by eliminating existential threats before they spread. The High Sovereign made his decision. Implement the Sundering Protocol. All 17 contested worlds are to be rendered uninhabitable. If we cannot have them, neither shall humanity. On the rebuilt plains of what had once been North America, Admiral Saren Vega stood beneath an open sky for the first time in her life. Earth's restoration was proceeding even faster than projected, the advanced terraforming systems accelerated by the reality engineering technology that had become humanity's hallmark. Her neural interface pinged with an urgent communication from the Gestalt intelligence. We've detected energy signatures consistent with planet-killer weapons being moved into position around all 17 colony worlds. The distributed consciousness informed her. The Viridians appear to be implementing a scorched earth policy. Saren closed her eyes, momentarily disappointed though not surprised. The intelligence had calculated a 78.3% probability of this outcome. Implement contingency horizon, she ordered. Priority is preservation of all sentient life forms on the targeted worlds. Throughout human space, a specific subset of the fleet activated specialized systems. On the 17 threatened worlds, billions of inhabitants from various collective species suddenly found themselves and their immediate surroundings transported to massive habitat structures in orbit around their planets, moments before the Viridian weapons began bombarding the surfaces. In the council chamber on 6 Terra Prime, the emergency session was interrupted by the sudden appearance of Admiral Vega, this time accompanied by 3 other humans whose neural interfaces marked them as military commanders. "Your planet killers have been deployed," she stated without preamble. "All civilian populations have been evacuated to safety." The council erupted in confusion and outrage. "What have you done with our people?" demanded Morden. "Protected them from your own weapons," Saren replied calmly. "A demonstration of both our technological capabilities and our ethical principles." The High Sovereign rose to his full height, bioluminescent patterns flashing in complex rage. "This is an act of war. You've abducted billions of collective citizens. No one has been harmed," Saren countered. "Unlike your attempted genocide of 17 populated worlds. The evacuation was a necessary response to your aggression." She gestured, and the chamber's center filled with holographic images of the massive orbital habitats now housing the evacuated populations. "Your citizens are free to return to the collective or remain under human protection, as they choose. We have no interest in unwilling subjects." "This proves our concerns about humanity were justified," Zixteri declared. "You represent a fundamental threat to the established order of the galaxy." For the first time, Saren's expression hardened. "The established order you speak of is one built on the attempted extermination of our species. We have not returned seeking vengeance for that crime, only the restoration of what was ours." She paused, looking around at the assembled representatives. "But since diplomatic approaches have failed, we will now demonstrate why your ancestors feared human potential." With a thought, she activated the next phase of humanity's return. Throughout Viridian space, thousands of spatial anomalies began to appear, gateways between normal space and the dimensional pocket where humanity had evolved for 40 millennia. "These are interdimensional anchors," Saren explained as the council watched in horror. "They connect your reality with the space we've inhabited during our absence. They cannot be destroyed by conventional means, as they exist partially outside your physical laws." "What is your demand?" the High Sovereign asked, recognizing the shift in power dynamics. "The same as before, recognition of our sovereignty over our ancestral worlds. But now we add a condition. The Viridian Collective will establish a non-aggression pact with humanity and open diplomatic relations with our government." "And the alternatives?" "There are no favorable alternatives for the Collective," Saren stated simply. "We could, if necessary, shift your entire civilization slightly out of phase with the rest of the galaxy, effectively isolating you from all other species. We prefer cooperation, but we are prepared for any scenario." 3 standard years later, High Sovereign Zixteri stood beside Admiral Saren Vega at the dedication of the new Galactic Cooperation Center, built in orbit around a neutral star system. The structure itself was a marvel of human reality engineering, larger on the inside than the outside, with environments that simultaneously accommodated the biological needs of every known sentient species. "I still find it difficult to comprehend," Zixteri admitted privately to the human leader, "how your species achieved such advancement in what was, for us, a mere 15,000 years." Saren smiled. "Time flowed differently in our dimensional pocket. More importantly, we were united by a common purpose: survival and return. When an entire species dedicates itself to understanding the fundamental nature of reality, progress accelerates exponentially." "And now," the High Sovereign asked, "with your return accomplished, What purpose drives humanity? Exploration, Saren replied without hesitation. Not just of space, but of possibility. There are dimensions beyond our own, civilizations outside our galaxy, concepts beyond our current comprehension. The universe is vastly stranger and more wonderful than even we realize. She gestured toward the gathered representatives of 200 species, the expanded Galactic Council that had replaced the Viridian Collective's dominance. And now we can explore it together, as equals. That is what we wanted all along, not dominance, but partnership. The High Sovereign's ancestral memories stirred again, but this time with a different message, not of warning, but of possibility. Perhaps the ancient texts had been misinterpreted. Perhaps humanity's ability to bend reality to will was not a threat, but the next step in galactic evolution. As the ceremony concluded, Admiral Vega prepared to return to Earth. The restoration was nearly complete, and soon the planet would once again be the vibrant blue jewel that humans had evolved upon. "We're still watching you," Zegsteri said, only half-jokingly. "I would expect nothing less," Saren replied with a smile. "And we're watching what lies beyond the galaxy's edge. When the extragalactic visitors we've detected finally arrive, you'll be glad to have humanity as allies." The High Sovereign's bioluminescence pulsed with alarm. What visitors? But Admiral Vega had already stepped through a fold in reality, leaving the leader of the former Viridian Collective with yet another reminder that in this new era, humanity didn't just participate in reality. They comprehended it on a level that the rest of the galaxy was only beginning to understand. And when the darkness from beyond finally reached the Milky Way, that understanding would be the galaxy's salvation.